Hope you enjoyed a little glimpse into what we do each day here at Satar. Really what always strikes me, the arts are essential for education, but I think even more so right now is the sense of belonging that Satar brings for our young people. Many of our young people at this point in time are hearing from powerful places that they don't belong, and at Satar they can come and they can have relationships that are meaningful and loving with peers, with faculty, with staff, and really just know how much they matter. So I invite you to join our community. We have so many roles for you. If you like to volunteer, you could volunteer teach. You could just come and spend some time with our young people. We have a fabulous leadership council that I mentioned, and we're always eager to recruit really wonderful civic-minded individuals like you. We have a board of directors, and we always need financial support because 80% of our students are from households with low income, so we don't have a lot of earned income. We raise our money through the community. So today, in fact, we're really looking towards raising money to our sound design class, where our young people are learning music production through Ableton software. And any donations that we receive tonight will go to supporting those young people. Sound is kind of our theme for tonight in a way, and I'm excited to hand the stage over to the people you really came to hear tonight. We have our fabulous moderator, an alum, an actor, and an amazing human, Miss Nyla Marie Mickle. I'm not going to go into all of the details because I want to let them share the night with you, so please look at Nyla's bio. And our very special guest tonight, we have radio and podcast producer AC Valdez, who will give us insights into sound in a different way. So I'm very excited to welcome him to the stage. He too has a very rich bio, so I hope you'll read that in your program. And now I invite you to take it over.
Thank you so much, Miss Maureen, for that lovely introduction. Thank you all so much for being here with us tonight. We're really, really, really excited on behalf of myself and the whole Satar family. Just thank you. I know life gets crazy and busy, so we really thank you for being here tonight to speak to our special guest, AC Valdez, who I'm really grateful and appreciative is here with us tonight. I have a million questions for you about different projects you're working on and the grains you've created. But to get us started, where did your journey with the arts begin?
I would say when people ask that kind of question, a lot of people the thing that first comes to mind for them is visual art, right? Mm-hmm. With me, in my family, in my house, as a kid growing up, it was always music. Yeah. It was always sitting at the dinner table and having my mom or my dad pop quiz me on, okay, who is this? And inevitably it was with my mom, Van Morrison, and with my dad it was like all sorts of Latin jazz stuff, Buena Vista Social Club, all the way up to Katie Lang, and a whole bunch of other like rock groups that, frankly I grew up around in LA when I was a kid, and then as I got older, I started getting into reggae and ska, and my mom bought me a Desmond Decker album. That was kind of my introduction to like art. But my sisters have been dancers. My middle sister is a artistic director with a touring show for Cirque du Soleil. So art is just like it's a big formative part of my family life and my background.
Wow. So would you say that, I know you talked about music, so would you say like growing up the music that your family listened to kind of influenced your music taste as well?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it also taught me like the importance of being eclectic about it. Like really not trying to pigeonhole yourself into listening too much to any one thing. Like it's nice to be a fan, but like if you're not going out there and looking for something weird, then you're gonna be pretty one note yourself.
So would you say, also talking about, you said music, you listened to that a lot growing up. So would you say that kind of introduced you to, I don't know, or made you think more deeply about kind of like the audio aspect of it all, of the arts, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, I think it plays a little bit into my career in that you listen to a musical phrase and you start noticing patterns in people's speech.
Yeah.
And so if you grew up like I did, listening to NPR in the backseat of the car, you start noticing particular speech patterns. And I probably adopt a whole lot of those because I've been in public radio for a very long time. We're in and out of it, in spoken word audio. And so the rhythm of speech, the cadence of the way people talk, the fact that I'm repeating myself right now and I'm realizing that, that all kind of plays into a musicality of speech and a tendency for me to treat the voice, even when spoken, as part of sound design, if you can, and be able to listen for it as a producer and editor,
Yeah.
and even as a speaker.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And I know you just mentioned NPR. So based on our brief chat we had before last week, I saw that you worked on a few projects with NPR, and a common theme that I saw throughout just a few of them, like how to build a happy life, was wellness. So do you think it's important for topics like health and wellness to be discussed in the arts? And also, do you think it being touched on in podcasts makes it easier for people to digest?
You know, I think people have a real appetite for health and wellness. It's not, I wouldn't say the bulk of my career, but I do think it's something that's really quite important. And honestly, especially with podcasts, because they tend to be very often such a private thing.
Yeah.
You can ingest those while not being around other people and having some inner thoughts and relationships to the things that people are saying only to your head. And I feel like that kind of self-reflection is a really valuable piece of the audio landscape when it comes to, you know, there are all these meditation podcasts. I think one, I'm trying to remember, it's quite good, done by a former ABC News anchor. I can look it up if you all want to chat about it later. Dan Harris, I think is his name. But that's a really valuable spot for audio.
Yeah. Speaking of NPR, how did you get there?
I lucked out. I went to school for broadcast journalism at Emerson College. I then got an internship at the NewsHour with when Jim Lehrer was still the anchor. And from there, as an intern, I kept just talking to all the senior producers, bugging them incessantly about, well, what I really want to do is radio. Do you guys have any friends over at NPR? And I got very lucky because this really wonderful woman called Michelle Mark was starting a show around that. And it was called Tell Me More. It was fantastic. Michelle is easily my favorite interviewer on the entire network, if not all of public radio. And it put a real emphasis on several things. Art, the lives of people of color, race issues in the United States, and spirituality in ways that just other shows just didn't do that at the time. And so that's how I got my first job and foot in the door at NPR as an editorial assistant.
Wow.
Which was a trip. It's really intimidating when your boss all of a sudden tells you, okay, you like the idea of getting that person? Call them. It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
But one thing you kind of learn in the course of having that kind of career, and I think this is one reason why introverted or shy people may often get into audio, is because there's no visual component. But the beauty of it is, especially if you're calling somebody, you don't necessarily have to be face-to-face with someone, and a lot of times it's a lot easier once you get used to it to have a conversation over the phone.
Yeah, it's true. So that being your first project you ever worked on, would you say that inspired projects projects that you created on your own or worked on after that?
Definitely inspired. It inspired me to work on other projects after that. I got very lucky. I worked on a show called Latino USA and was lucky to run that for a couple of years up in Harlem. And then around 2014, the podcast industry really took off with a show called Serial. I'm sure plenty of you have heard it. And a bunch of different companies were forming, and a bunch of money got infused into the space. I started working in a company called Panoply, which was hiring for a contract producer for a show called Our National Conversation About Conversations About Race. But Tell Me More was also like foundational in like realizing that there's so many more aspects. So like we didn't just talk about, you know, terrible incidents. We talked about the show Atlanta, which is a work of genius. We talked about lots and lots of other things that where it's kind of like really important to remember to be well-rounded in our identities, the art that people create.
So kind of going back to what you were talking about before, you said that you went to Emerson College. So kind of, have you always known that you wanted to pursue a career in audio production and editing?
No. So in the process of applying to colleges, I realized that I didn't want to do any one thing in particular. And the way my mind worked at the time was, well, okay, what's a career I can enter in where I can kind of do a little bit of everything? And journalism was the answer.
Yeah.
It's okay to be curious about everything, move from beat to beat to beat to beat. And so that's kind of the way I got into it. I knew I wanted to do audio because I was a little bit camera shy and I didn't really like the idea of being in front of people, like a little more comfortable with it now. But at the time, I realized that there was an opportunity to use my love of music, my love of talking to people, and no need to be on camera, which is not really an option anymore in terms of like now being TikTok and Instagram, but it got me ready.
Wow, so that was a bit about your past. Let's move to the present. So what's life like for you now? Are there any projects that you're currently working on?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently shopping around a show to a few different networks. I'm calling Serious Nonsense. This was initially a show I piloted with a really wonderful website called defector.com, which does sports, politics, news, science. It's really broad. But they also have this really funny show called Normal Gossip. Normal Gossip is just two people talking to each other about drama. Like just personal drama told to you by a friend of a friend, you know, the kind of thing that you talk about over brunch or something like that. I was kind of like, I want to do something tangentially related to that. And in the course of my career, I've come to know all sorts of like really creative writers, thinkers, comedians, people like that. And I realized too that it wasn't enough to just do a straight ahead interview because that's really not going to work. You ever watch Hot Ones on YouTube? It's this guy talking to celebrities while they are eating progressively hotter chicken wings.
I have seen it.
So you have to have a gimmick, but like I don't want the gimmick to necessarily be like shallow. Although sometimes yes, it could be. But in some of the pilot episodes I realized I wanted the second half or the subsequent episode to be a game with the interviewee. I liked making up those games as much as I liked interviewing these people when I was piloting. And so the concept is, this podcast is interview game, but also merch. This is one of the games I've designed. I'm working on a few different others, and I'm really excited to like have that interview process and the games that I like playing with people on air lead into something that could actually be merged to bring people physically in contact with each other. But the other inspiration is, you know, I mentioned growing up in the backseat listening to NPR too much. The beauty of shows like Car Talk was that they were smart but dumb. The beauty of shows like Wait, Don't Tell Me is that they make you feel smarter, they're a little dumb. It's okay to like to have fun, and I've worked on really serious stuff, and I realized when I left my last full-time job that I needed to like put joy first for a little while. And so that's what I'm attempting to do right now. So if you go to joyfulamazing.biz, you can all pull out your phones right now. You'll see kind of where I'm going with this. There may be a Patreon, a network may pick me up, but we're going to see where it goes.
Well, getting into that, let's talk about your production company, Joyful, Amazing, Wonderful Industries. Now, what inspired that name?
I had a boss who shall remain nameless, who would always get really grumpy with I always thought I would take myself a little too seriously. I kind of realized that, yeah, actually after doing gun violence coverage, a lot of tragic race coverage, a bunch of other serious news, I was kind of like, oh, okay, I'm going to make this ridiculous company name in order to remind myself of that mission every single time. I have to say joyful, amazing, wonderful industries to everybody else that might care to hear about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a mantra as much as it is a company name.
Wow, I love that. I'd say, So I know you talked about, I read the bio online for this production company. So I know you all produce podcasts and radio shows, but tell me a little bit more about the games that you all create over there.
So, like I said, Wet, Soggy, Damp, or Dry, which is the name of the first game that kind of came out of the pilot process that I was doing. Came out of the game that I played with my first interviewee, and he had gone to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and he had this lovely line in his piece about it where he said, before I went on this trip, everybody described the atmosphere to me in terms of moisture. And I said, oh, that's interesting, why? And he said, oh, it's just this sweaty capitalist environment where everyone's trying to sell you the best mousetrap or like an ice cream maker or something else like that. They really got to make a sale. They really got to get to you. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, what else can I analogize? So I put him through, okay, I'm going to name like 5 or 6 things for you. And I want you to tell me whether you want them wet, soggy. I think the pilot was clammy, but I wrote damp because I don't like the word clammy. Wet, soggy, damp, or dry. And so we talked a little bit more about, favorite sandwiches, the grass under your feet. At one point I asked him about your favorite book, and he said, oh, he was very poetic about this. I want my prose to be dry and crisp and clear. And I said to him, that's an English language problem. Because being bilingual, I want my prose to be sopping wet. I want Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I want yellow butterflies. I want imagery. I want to know what the ground smells like. But it's a matter of taste, but it's also a matter of cultural relation, and the way that you get to know other people by playing silly games like this is actually pretty revelatory in a way that provides an excuse to get a little bit deeper than the surface of, hi, I'm AC, nice to meet you. Yeah, I make radio and podcasts.
That's beautiful. And we talked about it before, you all make it an opportunity to play this game during the networking section, so I'm very excited for that. So I know you talked about kind of like what inspired this game, but was this actually the first ever game that you created?
Yeah, it was. I took while I was doing job applications and coming up with this company and a whole bunch of other things, I was also taking a course in game design. And the instructor was quite good. Really liked the product, and I kind of was like, oh, okay, this is like something I can do. But I was making games before for talking with people, making like a physical game in the service of people talking to each other.
Yeah.
That's just a different mode of kind of doing the same thing. But it's nice to like translate that out.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, like, what connections are there between, I guess, being this, like, game maker, but then also, like, audio producer? Like, what, how would I say, like, what, I guess, traits or what aspects of each kind of, not, I guess you can say career, like, relate to each other? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, not all games are created equal, because, like, there's math and strategy in a lot of them, like positioning in chess or something like that. I'm really working on games that force human interaction without involving your phone, if at all possible. Because I think there's some value in that. But I think going back to like me having to call my first interviewee for Tell Me More back in the day, getting down to that deeper level, that's what I want the games to do. I want them to have simple rules that you can probably grasp within like 3 to 5 minutes. And then I want you to have a good time actually interacting with the other person instead of figuring out how to, well, that's not necessarily true. Well, maybe trying to screw them over and win, but also like in the course of that, actually getting to have arguments, getting to make jokes, getting to like really connect on a level. But like, we need these aids as much as we need like conversation. Because the best thing about listening to a good radio story, about a good podcast, about a good interview, is that afterwards you can go to somebody you care for, or a friend or a coworker, and say, "Oh, you know, you heard this really interesting thing," and like actually discuss it with them too. This is just a different way of getting to that, because that personal connection is more needed than ever. That's the mission.
Personal connection. What advice would you give to someone who wants to create a game, especially like you said, one that's kind of like geared to urge people to, you know, connect with people more, like face-to-face contact? What advice would you give to someone?
Think about the most pleasant interactions you've ever had with a complete stranger. Try to replicate that. You know, whether it was something where you got into a random discussion at the airport. Americans are very chatty people. And a lot of times, if you're lucky, they'll want to do you a small favor and it'll make your entire day. Think about that and think about how you would turn that into an interaction that people have to get good at. Or think about the qualities that you like about your friends. And how to bring more of that out in them. Like, I think the nice thing about this is it's built on argumentation. And I have some friends who are lawyers, some friends who are comedians, and some friends who are jerks. This is really good for them.
So with this game, I don't know, all this for some reason has reminded me, especially when you were talking about like human connection, just how, especially nowadays, sad to say with my generation, where, you know, on our phones, social media is a
Don't
big
get
thing.
down on yourself.
I know. I'll try.
Break them all.
Yes. But with something that's like really, really, I guess you can say, a popular topic of conversation is AI. So how would you say that's played, not played a role, but like affected your career in audio production, but also creating these games?
I don't use AI to create games. Like that is actually really, I've discovered, very taboo among the game creator community. I'm grateful for that because I think it lends a certain guardrail to that kind of thing, and particularly with the mission that I have with this and the goal being human interaction.
Yeah.
If I'm starting off with interacting with a machine, it's not getting anywhere. I saw some meme today about like, why would I ask AI anything? A carpenter doesn't talk to his hammer. You know? But as far as what AI has done for audio production, AI has pretty much always been present in audio production.
Really?
Yeah, and it manifests in different ways. But the speech pattern recognition that AIs are getting is more and more competent. I wouldn't say it's always good, especially when it comes to very non-standard accents, people who have like probably certain languages, and just if you switch back and forth in different languages, it's not going to be as good. But I try to avoid those too, because I think what's a real problem at the beginning of my career? Transcription. The horrors of transcribing, how I wish this on nobody. But to have a rough transcript almost immediately, it's a great thing. To be able to sort through that, that's a great thing. I don't want it to go any further than that because I regard what I do as a creative process and not necessarily one that where I want something else generating it for me. Again, I don't want to just let the hammer fly and like see if I can get it to hit the nail on the head.
Well, talk me a little bit more about kind of your career in audio production. Being an audio producer, editor, and I know based on our conversation you said you're a journalist first. What's something you wish more people knew about that career and in your industry?
Just how many people it takes to actually create something that seems quite simple. If you're doing an interview, you've got to have research, you've got to have fact checking, you've got to have post-interview fact checking, you've got to have audio editors, producers, cutters. There's probably like some kind of senior person taking a listen before it even goes out on air if you're lucky. If it's live, you need a very good host to keep track of time. You need a director to actually cue that host as to how much time is left. Those are several different layers when it just sounds like two people talking in a room.
Yeah.
Podcasting kind of simplifies that because you can take your time and actually just do that. But if you're listening to like radio, there's all of those roles involved. This is actually, did you want to play that clip at some point? Because I can point that out.
Oh, we can play it now, please.
So I'll give a quick intro to this. I was working at, again, Panoply, back in, I think this was 2016 or 2015. And they had spun off a children's division. And so the concept that my friend Dan had pitched was to do a documentary children's cartoon show about the early lives of prominent athletes. So we got an interview with Paul Rabel, who was or still is one of the greater lacrosse players of all time.
All right.
So because of that, I didn't have really a defender on me.
Take the shot! Do it, Paul!
It's one of those like half-court shots in hoops. I closed my eyes pretty much. There was 3 seconds left.
Shoot it! Shoot it! Reach back, little extra. You got this, buddy. Take that shot.
And just shot the ball as hard as I could. And it absolutely singed the top right corner.
Oh! Yes, Paulie! Yes! Yes! Oh, yes! Oh! Attaboy, shooter! Yes!
That was actually the lucky.
So yeah, there were a lot of elements. I don't know if you but it's beyond what you just even heard. Like the guy who was shouting the coach was my friend Efim, who happens to now be the head of engineering at the New York Times. I had to write that script, or my friend Dan wrote that script and I edited it. We all had to agree on kind of the beat out of the story that we had interviewed Paul for. One of us had to do the interview. I had to edit the script while Dan did the interview. We hired a child actor to like do the flashback scenes. Like Efim luckily did the scoring and like all the crazy sound design you heard. And we made like 8 or 9, maybe even 10 of those episodes. But it's really just kind of a testament to like what you can do in nonfiction.
Yeah.
And this was for kids, so it's a little bit more fun, a little bit more loose than you be able to get away with some places. But it was really just like really rewarding. But gosh, there were so many steps that go into it.
Yes. Especially, I think you don't always hear people kind of talk about like the production side of things. I know it's the same like with performing arts as well as like I'm sure like music or just different things like that. You don't always hear the production aspect of it. So I think it's really beautiful to, I don't know, like just sit down and really listen to it, especially like I heard like the little footsteps or like the music. Like what would you say kind of, I guess you can say like pushes you to make some of the selections you did, like specifically like with the music, like what caused you to kind of pick the sound that you had in the clip?
Well, we left a lot of that sound design up to Efim. That is the really, really tricky part. He's a genius at that. What I would do when we were doing initial listens and initial passes was listen not necessarily for what was there, but for what was missing. And that is a skill that you really have to hone over a long time. You can make various judgment calls about, do we need a thunderclap? Do we need some kind of echo on this sound thing? Do we need, I remember at one point, I was trying to like write one of these episodes, and we had a wheelchair basketball player. And I said, how are we gonna get tape of wheelchair basketball, and if he looks at me and says, "We have in our sound library sounds of wheelchairs and sounds of basketballs bouncing. We're gonna be fine." It's like, oh yeah.
So do you kind of think just having that team to fall back on makes that process a whole lot easier when creating pieces?
Sure, yeah, because doing anything in a vacuum is a complete fallacy. Doing anything completely by yourself is just silliness. I think one good example is I can hear very acutely the air conditioning running in this room.
Yeah.
If I heard a recording of this and it was just our voices and not any of the reverb that's coming from being mic'd, I would notice something very hollow about that. But that noticing doesn't happen to everyone, and it certainly doesn't happen right away.
Yeah.
So if you really want to listen, start listening to not just the voices, but the environment.
So our time has unfortunately come to the end. So just one quick question for you before we give it to our audience for questions. Is there anything that's coming up for you? Anything we should be on the lookout for?
Again, yeah, if you want to pull out your phones, go to joyfulamazing.biz. There's a form on the contact page. Shoot me an email if you're interested in being in touch, and I will update anybody about all of the stuff that's coming out. This may get published fairly soon if I'm very lucky. I just came out with a new prototype game called Flips and Flops, kind of to teach my 4-year-old about decision making and risk and winning. I will probably be launching a Patreon to try to kickstart the show if it doesn't get picked up by a network. So if that happens, and you want to support me, great. If I get picked up by the network, I'll let you all know too.
Beautiful. Well, all right. We have our two lovely interns, Ruth and Esme, coming around with mics for any questions that you all may have. So any questions? Oh, yeah.
Hello. So you mentioned sort of the state of the industry in 2014 around serial, and there was like a big injection of like money into podcasting. And you mentioned a couple of times you're looking for a network for your show now. What would you say is the difference in the broader podcasting industry 2014 and 2026 that you're finding? And also game recommendations, something that's commercially available.
Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza. I'll start with the second question first. It's really good. It's by this studio called Dolphin Hat Games. And then as to the state of podcasting now, so the influx of money, the bubble burst. People were extraordinarily negative about it for a very, very long time and looking for alternative financial models. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the light outline as well. I try to make eye contact. Some new models are emerging. The really inspiring ones are worker-owned cooperatives. Defector, where I piloted the show, happens to be one of them. There's another one called Multitude. And then other places that have been audio the whole time and never really bought into the gravy train too much of celebrity podcasting or things that got very trendy, they're still there. And they're still spinning off new things. There's a company called Kaleidoscope, which is now headed by a former head of iHeartMedia, which has always been a radio giant. So it's not where it was. What's exciting about it to me right now is that the people who were always there to begin with are pretty much still always going to be there. They're still trying to figure out how to get paid, and as patrons of an arts institution, I'm sure that you know that none of us want to write grants, but it's kind of a necessary thing. But there are other alternatives. There are other ways for worker-owned co-ops to lift each other up, and there are other ways for people to donate to Patreon. Like really, I think the other thing that I would ask everybody in this room to do is sign up for Patreon and look for something interesting there. I have a whole bunch of podcast recommendations I think I sent on to Nyla, and would be happy to just get my phone out during the network thing and show you all the shows that I think are good and worth supporting. Because a lot of them are independent too, and easily would take your money.
All right. Any other questions?
So there's the old line that radio makes the best pictures,
Oh yeah.
and so there's a visual component to what you're doing, and I guess my question to you is, when you're organizing a story,
Mhm.
do you ever do storyboards that have visual components as you organize the sounds?
I'm a terrible cartoonist. I tend to write things out first. I like bulleted outlines for some reason, because they help me visualize things in a really much more interesting way. And the other exercise that I think I saw on this website called transom.org, which is an education website and skills up training and gear review website for audio professionals, is this entry called My Kingdom for Some Structure. And this guy tries to draw out on cocktail napkins, not the beats of a story, but the structure of a story. So if you listen to This American Life, it's this happens, this happens, this happens, exclamation point. This happens, this happens, this happens, exclamation point. You listen to something like Radio Hour, the way that he envisions it anyway, I kind of always agree with this, is there's two people talking and they're moving along parallel tracks. And then they encounter this interesting thing. And then they get a little farther apart, and then the interesting thing gets a little bit louder because the sound design is such a fundamental part of that show. And finally it's at the mouth of the megaphone and it's as loud as it can be, and then it dips down. And you come back and you have a little bit of a debrief. And that's kind of the visualizations that I like. I'm not good at storyboarding because I just am not much of a cartoonist. I think it's brilliant though. I wish I could do it, but yeah.
Sounds like it's more about cadence.
A lot of it is about cadence. A lot of it is about like what I was talking with Nyla about, like rhythm, pattern. My favorite thing about that entry on Transom is what you call the E of a story. So you start out with a narrative exposition. You go out to report a scene, you go back down, and there's some kind of conclusion. It might relate back to that loop of the scene. I don't know how much of that makes sense because it's pretty abstract. But every 3-minute story you hear in All Things Considered or Morning Edition follows something pretty close to that. It's a formula, and it's a pretty successful one at that.
We have time for a few more questions.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, to what degree have you worked with or in Foley sound? And if you have, do you know of any tricks off the top of the head that are really interesting, sound cues that people wouldn't really know the origins of? Like, I know sometimes people will do like celery breaking for like.
Oh, for like bones breaking, things like
Yeah,
that.
something
Yeah.
like
I've never worked traditionally in Foley sound, like not professionally. If you ever get the chance to go to the Hirshhorn for Sound Scene, they put it on every year, I think usually in June or July. Sound Scene is an offshoot of this group I belonged to, or still sometimes work with, called DC Listing Lounge. They have a lot of creative sound design pieces, but my friend Chris Combs, who is a really brilliant artist, programmed a speak and spell to like spin around, and he had all sorts of different emotions. And so what we did was kind of reprogram that speak and spell to do things like shock and surprise. And that was a piece that we submitted to Sound Scene a few years back. And, we had arguments and like, basically we would cover our mouths and and then like break a bottle and then have each other just kind of arguing back and forth. Like you can kind of fake Foley if you just want to get real creative about it. I think kind of my favorite one little secret that I ever heard was just spread a little sand in a box, get some old shoes, like it has to be a wooden box, and just kind of scrape them along. It's pretty close to people's idea of leaves crunching in the woods.
And we have time, I think, for 2 more. We have one in the front. Yes.
So I just wondered what, you talked about AI, just using it as a guide and staying authentic to your thoughts of how you put things together. When you think about youth and how they can create, as we're talking to Nana about, she could make this her profession if she wanted. What advice would you give to young adults as they enter a world that is changing so rapidly so that they can keep their authentic voice without it being lost to a guy that might not be as authentic if they didn't have what we have out there today? If that makes sense.
For me, and I'm not going to say this is advice that will work for everybody, because I think there are certain people that this is just, it will take time to get to, but it's a thing I'm really grateful for, especially early in my career. And I keep like thinking back to that first phone call I had to make for my first real job, and how that was. Think about how many conversations you have per day with an actual person. Have more, like, spend more time on that per day than you do looking at your phone or a screen. You would probably feel better at the end of the day. I always do. Pay attention to what you're saying in that process. Pay attention to how you're saying it. And discover what it is you like about not just what's coming out of your mouth, but how people are giving energy back to you. And you might, in that process, discover what kind of person you are, what kind of interactions you are, how that actually makes you feel, and how it might actually make you feel less depressed or less anxious. You know, the thief of joy is comparison, and I think there's so much comparison to be done online, but when you're interacting with somebody in person, and you can see the spinach in their teeth, excuse me, then, you know, you probably do a little bit better.
This is just out of curiosity,
Sure.
but is there anything you notice now after getting into audio editing that you didn't notice before, like in everyday life, like when watching a movie or talking to people?
All the time. Every once in a while, I'll be listening to the radio with my wife in the car and my kid, and I'll hear something weird, and I'll go, "What was that?" She'll say, "What?" And sometimes it'll be a phrase, sometimes it'll be a random noise, sometimes it'll be the way that something is worded. And this is me, just like my editor brain being really picky. But if you stare at a wall long enough, you'll start to notice the imperfections, and that's eventually it's something you need to work at turning off, because it becomes unfair to other people who don't do what you do in everyday life. But that's mostly it. Like, a lot of it is about listening to radio podcasts and realizing, actually, 2 things. The way to tell a well-produced podcast is 2 different ways. If you hear no breaths at all, or double breaths, that editor is not paying close enough attention. The other thing that you will hear that always drives me nuts is people are not putting S filters on their audio tracks, and so that creates this really sharp, high-pitched sound. And if you're fortunate like me and you've lost a little bit of your high-end hearing, it's not so bad. But a lot of that, especially because you're often listening in headphones, and if you are like me, noise canceling headphones, you're gonna pick up a lot of that, and that can really damage your hearing over a long period of time. And like, I would advise everybody, if you're not already doing it, like turn down the very high frequencies on your phone. If you're listening to that kind of thing, because it's very damaging. But it's also quite irritating to me, just because I make an effort at doing that.
Okay, we have one more question now.
So, I'm personally kind of interested in starting my own podcast.
I'm sorry?
I'm personally interested in starting my own podcast. So I was just wondering if you had any pointers on trying to figure out how to kickstart it and monetize it.
I am bad at that part of the business. That's why I'm trying to join networks. They have people who worry specifically about that kind of thing. I have never used Kickstarter. I've been very lucky to have come into podcasting from like established business sides, and this is honestly my first time striking out on my own, so I can't offer any real advice that I would feel good about giving you. Aside from word of mouth is really key. So if you have friends who are willing to hype you up, tell them about it. Like any other art that you're pursuing, really, really a good idea. And don't ignore the possibility that video now could help spread your message and make more people aware of you. I don't love it. I don't love making videos, but you know, they are where people live right now.
Well, all right. Those are all the questions we can take tonight. So thank you so much for all of those. Before we go out into the lobby for the networking portion of it all, I asked you all please scan the QR code on the back of your program just to fill out a quick survey about your experience tonight. But yes.